And I welcome everyone to Press TV's news in depth in one of the day's top stories. Russia says that Washington is trying to convince several Central Asian countries to take in Afghans who previously worked with U.S. forces.
Americans withdrawing from Afghanistan wanted to place parts of their infrastructure, arms and troops on the territory of the neighboring countries so that if needed, Afghanistan could be attacked from there if it behaves badly. That's what this is about. But if you think that any country in Central Asia or elsewhere is interested in becoming a target so that the Americans could fulfill their initiatives, I really doubt it.
Sergei Lavrov said he was ready to mediate in Afghanistan. He said it's regrettable that the European Union fears that the fall of Kabul to the Taliban is a victory for Moscow and Beijing. He said that such remarks show the bloc is obsessed with playing politics and is uninterested in the fate of ordinary Afghans. Meanwhile, China said the U.S. Army and militaries of other coalition partners should be held accountable for alleged rights violations they committed in Afghanistan. Now joining us for the program is Eve Zangler, author and activist, joining us from Montreal, and Tony Gosling, investigative journalist from Bristol. Gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you both to the program. I guess we'll start there in Bristol with you, Tony. Your initial thoughts on the story.
Well, isn't it extraordinary that the European Union in Brussels is saying, oh, well, this victory has now been handed to Beijing and Moscow? It's an absolutely incredible comment to make, because who is this victory? What's been going on here is since 2014, this is something like 7 years ago, the Americans have not really been fighting the Taliban. They've come to a peace agreement a long time ago, and it's just taken 7 or 8 years for them to slowly negotiate how they're going to withdraw. Now, this is, if anybody is behind what's happened in Afghanistan over the years, it's the Central Intelligence Agency that's been doing the negotiations in Doha, and specifically Zalmay Khalilzad, who I would like to see a little bit more of on the national media here in the West, explaining what he's been, all that he's been doing in these negotiations. So I think actually the European Union in Brussels is a bit unhinged to say that this is a victory that is going to be being handed over to to the Russians and the Chinese. It's something that the United States intelligence services have decided to do for their own reasons, and all of the blame mongering that's been going on in the press, there's been acres of it the last 2 weeks, every news bulletin full of it, saying, oh, isn't it terrible? Well, look, the Central Intelligence Agency in Qatar are the people in Doha, are the people who are responsible for this, so they should be the ones answering. But of course they're shying away from the cameras, and actually the journalists aren't even asking many of those questions. The questions that should be being asked are, of course, what was the West and NATO doing there? I think largely it was to do with destroying that nation's national identity, particularly because it's a Muslim nation. Now, if that was to happen to Israel, what would the world be saying? Destroying the Jewish identity of the Israelis. But that's what the West has been doing there. It's been overthrowing Islam effectively in the country. It's been trying to put in a non-Islamic government, a Western liberal government. Would you believe even trying to have a gay pride march in Kabul is one of those, and having the flag flying, So this is something which is just not going to go down well in Afghanistan. It shows that the cultural war that they've been trying to wage is almost farcical. And of course, they will never admit that they failed in that. But what they have succeeded in doing is growing lots of poppies. The Taliban in 2000 had stopped the growing of poppies, and the Mujahideen before them didn't agree with the country being used for the heroin trade, so they stopped it. But almost straight away, Lucy Morgan-Edwards, one of the EU's advisors in 2000, has pointed out that the straight into the ground went the poppies as soon as the Western forces turned up in Afghanistan in October 2001. And ever since, they've been growing them for the international heroin trade and that money is used to finance black operations, to pay mercenaries, to buy arms. And that's what's been going on in Afghanistan. And I wonder whether the main reason for them leaving now is simply because if there was a wider war was to break out, that those Western troops would be completely isolated there. So they need to get them out of the way.
Thank you, Tony. And Yves Engler, I'd like to welcome you to the program. Your initial take on this, please.
Well, I mean, I think obviously the U.S. efforts to build up forces to potentially reinvade Afghanistan from bordering states is not surprising, troubling, but not surprising. And I also agree with the Chinese official who said the U.S. is should be held, and allies like Canada, where I live, and other NATO allies should be held accountable for their killing of tens and tens of thousands of civilians. The endless, in recent years, dropping more than 7,000 bombs a year on Afghanistan. Is it a surprise that the population wanted the foreign troops out? I don't think so. And those who have perpetrated crimes should definitely be held accountable.
And Yves, why doesn't the U.S. or anyone involved in the NATO operation over the last 20 years, why shouldn't they be the ones that bear the brunt of taking in the refugees? They're the ones that made the country what it is today, and the people that helped them help make their lives what it is today. So if they need to flee the country, why would they put that burden on anyone else other than themselves?
No, of course not. I think that, and it's also a question of, the Canadian media is all under panic about getting Afghans out of the country and people we allied with and getting them out of the country. But what's been going on? Canada has been officially been out for 7 years. Why haven't more people been allowed to come before that? Additionally, though, I have to say it's pretty amazing how much attention there is devoted to the plight of those who supported the occupation. When we look back on occupations like the German occupation of France, those with the occupiers are not usually viewed in a particularly good light. But the Western media, the Canadian media, American media is completely obsessed with the plight of those who collaborated with the Western occupation. I'm not saying that I think those people should be allowed to leave the country if they want to leave the country. I don't think it's a good thing for, even if you did engage in translating information to perpetrate war crimes. I don't think it's a good thing for those people maybe to be executed or whatever in Afghanistan. But nonetheless, the proportion of the attention devoted to their plight is completely out of proportion. And yes, definitely, if you're gonna go in and bomb the hell out of a country, by the country for 20 years, you have a responsibility not only to pay reparations for those who are still in the country, but for those people who might want to leave because their livelihood, because their lives were destroyed. I think you also have a responsibility to open up the doors to let those people in.
And Tony, your final thoughts on the story, and if you want, exactly the European Union's take on this. Where is the win there for Russia and China in all this?
Well, I think what's happened to the United States is rather like, isn't it, what happened to the Russians back in the 1980s. The Russians got their fingers burnt. I think the Americans, to a certain extent, have having the same in Afghanistan. It almost seems like a thankless place for anyone to invade. If you hadn't made lots of money out of growing poppies for opium and selling heroin, that seems to be one of the main reasons they've been there. But look, Chen Zhu, who's the Chinese foreign minister, I totally agree with him, is that they should have to pay. And I'm talking about, in a legal way around the world for the crimes that they've committed by, the invasion of that country and the crimes that have been committed in there, particularly the cultural crimes in attempting to destroy Islam, which is what they've been doing in many, many countries around the world. But look, what's this really about? They talked about democracy and human rights, didn't they, when they went in there? They keep bleating now about women, which I find laughable. They're bombing the women in funerals and wedding parties, and then now we've got the mainstream press in the West here saying, oh, it's all about women's rights. We want to make sure that women get good education. Well, actually, yeah, that's fine, but why were you bombing the women then? That's the question I asked them. So it's not about democracy and human rights. It's actually been all about imperialism and mass killing, and particularly the attempt to overthrow the faith of Islam in Afghanistan. Of course, it's a very important geostrategic point as well. It's been getting in the way of cooperation between China and Russia and other countries in the middle of the what's it called, the World Island, isn't it, in Asia, right smack bang in the middle. And of course, it's about as far away as you can get from the United States. So it's about time that they started sorting out some of their own problems with terrible drug misuse and homelessness in the United States. Absolutely off the scale in the United States of America, in the big cities. Sort that out before you start having these ridiculous excursions, trying to build an empire around the world when you can't even get your own house in order.
And Yves, your final thoughts on this, please.
Well, I think that it's definitely good that U.S. troops are removing, and I think the more places in the world that U.S. troops can be taken out of, I think we've got to be careful about ongoing U.S. bombings. We also have to be careful. The Russian foreign minister is saying about future U.S. plans for subverting Afghanistan from bordering nations. It's a tragedy. I mean, it's a tragedy mostly for people in Afghanistan, of course, but hundreds of thousands of people have been killed, and in large part this is because a handful of the U.S.-based arms firms have seen their stock prices skyrocket over the past 20 years. And I think that's a big explanation for what's happened in Afghanistan over the past 20 years, is that there's some very powerful corporations in the U.S. that have made a lot of money off of selling those bombs that kill people at weddings.
Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us on the program. Bristol and Yves Engler, they're joining us from Montreal. And viewers, that's a wrap for this segment of your Press TV's News Review program. Thank you for joining us, and goodbye for now.